Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. In case you didn't view my last videos, my cheap attempt to sort of fix this motor the improper way is a complete failure. And I thought about putting thicker oil or the Lucas oil stuff in. Realistically, that stuff is just a band-aid. Either way you look at it, this motor is junk. This is a ticking time bomb. There's the reliability of this engine is nowhere where it should be, and there's always going to be this in the back of my head. It's going to blow up on me, probably at the worst time. So, realistically, trying to band-aid this, it's not going to work. I tried to. One attempt failed. Any way you look at it, for me to repair this engine properly, I have to remove it in order to change the crank and change one piston and rod, at least, without having proper machining tools at my disposal right now to fix this engine. If I'm going to remove the engine anyway to fix it, I might as well just throw a junkyard in it, because the amount of time and money I would have to put into this motor to fix it is not worth the time and money to hot swap a motor from the junkyard. And like I said, I can find one in the junkyard for $300 is the sweet one that I found that I'll probably go and find and grab. My coworker does not want to sell that engine because it's his backup for his Focus, or his son's backup for his Focus, because it's got over 300,000 miles on it. It's like, okay. So I'm going to just grab one from the junkyard and hot swap it. So this video is pretty much going to be an overview of me hot swapping this engine. And the way I'm going to do that is either one or two things are going to happen. There's not a whole lot of information about swapping an engine on this car without a lift. A lift, it does make it so much easier, but I'm not that special to have a lift. So, the idea for me here is to either pull the engine out through the top or drop it down to the ground and drag it out through the ground, because it is kind of high up in the air with the jack stands and everything. From what I could tell, I'm not totally sure, this engine and trans is held in by 3 motor mounts. One's there. There's another one underneath that's a dog bone that keeps the engine from torquing. And then there's another one underneath the battery. The 2 motor mounts are connected to the trans. This is the only motor mount connected to the engine. I'm hoping that if I remove all the front accessories, that I may be able to remove the engine through the top. I'm going to try to remove all the front accessories. Power steering pump, AC compressor is leaking. You might not be able to see that down in there. It's kind of hard to tell, but the AC compressor in this car leaks. I've been keep putting Freon in it because I couldn't find the leak until I saw that green oiled mess on the front of the clutch, which tells me the AC compressor has a very, very slow leak, because every year I would have to put Freon in the thing and I had no idea where I was going, so I kind of just kept filling it up until I seen that. So that tells me the AC compressor needs to be replaced. I haven't filled it up yet. It's been a year since I filled it up. It's probably going to need to be filled up again, so there's probably hardly anything left in the AC line. So the AC compressor has to be replaced. So I'm going to take that off. Power steering pump, I'm hoping I can take it off and move it to the side. This will be removed. The alternator on the back side, I will remove. The water pump, I'll probably remove. Everything I can remove off the front, minus the front crank pulley and the front cover. I don't really want to remove the front crank pulley unless I don't have to, because per the design of this engine, there is no keyway that holds that crank pulley or the front sprocket onto the crank. It's literally friction, which is dumb to me. So if I wanted to remove that to keep the harmonic balancer in time, the engine completely in time, both crank and camshafts, I would have to take the valve cover off, pin the cams, pin the crank, and then I can remove that and then hot swap a crank pulley. But I am going to try and just remove the engine over, up, and out with all the accessories off. This front engine mount also has to be changed. There's a lot of vibrations through the car, not by misfire or just that vibration that you would get when you hold a controller from a PlayStation or something. That's what this car does, and I've been ignoring it for the longest time, and usually it's this motor mount that goes bad because it's hydraulically filled. I'm going to change that too. So, to start removing things, I am going to drain the coolant, and I'm going to work probably on getting this intake off first. The harness, at least this one, unplug, I'll undo all the coils, keep them plugged in. I labeled at least the injectors and coils just to kind of give me a reference. Everything else I'll probably leave alone. It'll have its memory going back. I'm going to take the harness and peel it over to there. Take the intake off, power steering off. Try and get it down to a long block, and then I can use these with a chain and the cherry picker and yank it up and out, but we'll see. So this is just going to be overview. So rail is going to come off, intake manifold coming off is what I'm probably going to start working on, why it's draining coolant. Alrighty, I'm not sure where I left off for the intro. Well, most of the things for the motor are disconnected. Let's see. The intake is off. There's other people's videos that you can watch for that. Starter's off. Coolant pipes are off, and manifolds off. The thermostat's off. The EGR is off. Everything's unplugged and laid over the battery. Torque converter is disconnected. AC compressor, that is bad, is removed. Power steering is just kind of laying here. So like I said, maybe the main purpose of the video is to see if I can remove this engine without dropping the cradle, dropping the engine and trans together on the floor. I think by looking at this, it's kind of hard to see that if I removed every front accessory off the front cover, water pump still has to be removed, front dampener has to remove, front timing sensor needs to be removed, alternator is removed, the passenger side carrier bearing is removed off the block. Trying to get the alternator out from back here, royal pain. I kind of started bending the heat shield back to get to some of the bolts. I'll have to get the 2 or 3 underneath. I don't want to try and remove this heat shield because the bolts most likely will snap, so if I just bend the ever living crap out of the way, I maybe will be able to sneak in and sneak out. The idea is to take the manifold off and just shove it up against the firewall out of the way with the flex pipe that's down there with the O2 sensors and everything still connected. That would be the idea. But the purpose of this is I have to remove everything off the front side of the motor minus the front cover. And I think if I do that, I'll have enough room to push the engine up against the unibody on this side, and hopefully there's just enough room to clear the flex plate on this side, and I can just go straight up and out. That is the hope. But I'm going to remove the water pump, front dampener. FYI, that front dampener is not keyed at all. None of it's keyed. You are going to have to retime the engine if you take that off, which is really dumb in my book. I don't know why they decided to do that, but they decided to do that. And there goes my lug nuts. I did take off this tire just to get to the front accessories. Yeah, I believe if I can remove all the front accessories, go up against the front cover, I'm guessing, should have enough room to squeeze this pig out of here. I'll just have to retime the engine on the new engine when I put it in, which I still have to get one. But alternator's disconnected. Starter's kind of just laying up here. Original starter, original alternator. Kind of scared about that. But they haven't screwed up yet. I may replace that oil pressure sensor to see if the light will come back. But as for later down time, yeah, there's a bracket back there I have to remove that holds all those connectors for the O2 sensors. But this is where I'm at right now. Alrighty, so engine is out. This is how it sits right now. The transmission, see down there, is supported by a jack stand because the front of the transmission was falling down because it's only being held up by one mount, and that bone mount down there, that's not enough to hold the transmission up by itself. So there's a jack stand holding the front of the transmission up. You take all the front accessories off and the dampener. So you can see on the old engine here, you have enough to literally move the engine forward and it's straight up. It comes right out. Now, if you have a manual transmission, I don't see this happening because of the clutch. An automatic, you have enough room to scoot it that way and go straight up because the flex plate literally skates by the bell housing just enough. So all the wiring, everything's just shoved over. The manifold's kind of zip tied up there, kind of out of the way. Some of the heat shield is peeled back haphazardly. The carrier bearings are kind of laying over. Yeah, so on the old engine, taking the front dampener off is not a problem because this engine's junk. Valve cover's off. Pretty much this whole engine is stripped of everything. This here is the junkyard engine I got from the place I found. Basically the cheapest one for the mileage. This has 137,000, about 2,000 more miles than what my car and this motor has on it, about 135, which is fine. With a core charge, about 350 bucks out the door. Engine turnover quite good. I can feel the compression. They did just snipped all the wires and everything. No AC compressor, which is fine. I'll get a new one. I broke my old water pump, which is fine. I'll just use this one. This thing's been sitting for a little bit, but they had to get it out. This feels okay. This one feels okay. Actually better. I think the one on my old motor of this one was better, so I'll probably take this out. I'll take this off. The thermostat on the old motor that I took off, that one is better. Is basically brand new. I don't know what the shape of this intake manifold is compared to mine. Which one's better, I will use. Other than that, I'm going to take this off and the water pump off to get the engine back in, but it comes back to the point of what I mean before, is this front dampener is not keyed. Same with the front crank sensor. The snout of this bolt sticks out further than the dampener, and this is what's probably going to hinder me. I'd like to try and put this engine back in without removing the dampener, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, because I would have to buy the tools to reset the timing for this engine, the way it's timed. This dampener is actually not that bad a shape, considering, because the dampener on mine was actually pretty garbage. I gotta remove these studs for the alternator. I'm gonna change the spark plugs from that one to this one, because that one has like maybe 15,000 miles on those spark plugs. I don't know the spark plugs on this one. The coolant manifold back here is on it. E-jar's on it. I'm going to be taking off a whole bunch of different stuff on this. This is actually cleaner than my motor, considering the front cover does not have an oil leak that mine had for quite a while there. This engine feels good turning it over by hand. So this is zip tied here, the power steering pump. Here's the problem with doing it this way. So the whole car is up on jack stands. The front end is pretty high in the air. I have the front of the transmission hold up by a jack stand down there. With the dampener removed and on an automatic, you have enough room to go right to the side of the unibody frame rail and go straight up and out with the dampener removed. You had just enough room for it to skate by this, which is fine. But I'm trying to think of a way I can sneak this engine back in without removing the front dampener, because if you were to remove that front dampener, the bolt that goes for this dampener is a one-time use bolt. Kind of dark down there. It's a one-time use bolt. This dampener is junk, worse than the used motor. Broken water pump, gasket broken. The belt's in good shape. I'm going to reuse that. Fuel rail up here, I'm just going to reuse that. I don't know if any of these sensors, I would assume these sensors are good, but I will probably most likely change over everything. All these coils I'll keep as spares maybe. I'm just going to use what I have that I know works. The only thing with my intake manifold is that the butterflies that are in front to each cylinder, they're all wallered out and moving around, so I don't know how well this one is. I'll have to pull this off and see. The rear main on this engine, I don't think is leaking at all. I don't see any leaks on this engine, so it'd be a good idea to do the rear main, but because it's not leaking, and I don't really see a whole lot of rear mains on this engine failing, that I might just throw this in without a rear main, or And I'm contemplating here, because the front bell housing just skates by this brain work. The front bell housing of the transmission skates by this flex plate. Once you get the front dampener around this area right here, I'm thinking I can remove the flex plate, do a rear main, leave the flex plate off of it. I can probably skate it around the bell housing and front dampener with the unibody frame here, and then shove it forward in, let's see, this area here with the water pump and this pulley out of the way. Right here, I'll have enough room to put the flex plate back on the back here to get the flex plate back on. So I might do that. Taking the dampener off the old engine was not a bad idea because I'm not retiming that motor. That motor is literally a core at this point. It would have to be redone anyway to fix the issue with it. So at this point, I have to change over everything from my motor to this motor, kind of compare and contrast the two different parts, and get some gaskets. I would like to throw this in quickly. I'm thinking I might just do a rear main, leave the flex plate off of it, and see if I can skate by directly down through this frame rail, shove it over, and then put the flex plate back on, and then put it together. We'll have to see, but if you want to know, you can remove the engine out the top with an automatic. If you remove all the front accessories and the front dampener, it comes out just very, very simple, fast. The way I have it unhooked, everything, it literally has enough room to come forward and out, just the top. But it's a trade-off with the front dampener and timing setup. I'm going to try something else to not have to buy the timing tools to retime this engine. And we're going to try and sneak it back in by removing the flex plate and then moving it. Once the dampener is below the frame rail, move the engine forward. I think I have enough to sneak in there. We'll lock down the flex plate with a pry bar and torque the flex plate bolts back on, and then hook it back up to the transmission. That will be the game plan. Yeah, so that's where I'm at with it. The amount of time that it took me to remove this engine from actual clocking labor hours worked with hand tools and some air impact tools, you should be able to get this out in a weekend if you did it kind of like the same way I did. Because that's about, if you start early in the morning and do like a 10 to 12 hour day, one day tops, you should be able to get it out like this. I kind of have my labor all broken up for what I was looking for because I was doing a lot of research for engines. This was the best deal I could get. And appears to be all good. This was out of a 2006. But, alright, I'm rambling on. That's the it of removal. You can't get it out. Next would be installing.